Welcome. I'm Juan P Lluria, president of Lluria Fine Art Services, LLC. As many of you already know, I am an appraiser of fine art, antiques, residential contents, certified member of the American Appraiser Association in New York. And today, I'd like to discuss something that has always intrigued me. As you all know, smoking was the great vice of society in the 20th century. And along with smoking, which was a very glamorized vice, came all the accessories that it entailed. Most conspicuous among which was the cigarette box. The greatest jewelers of the time, Fabergé, Cartier, Tiffany, and others, created beautiful cigarette boxes that were carried in gentlemen's pockets, in their white tie and tails, or ladies' handbags. However, before smoking came in about the mid-19th century, people pinched snuff, which was a ground tobacco powder, and instead of smoking it orally and burning it up, they pinched this finely ground snuff, as many of you have seen in films, through their nose. The heyday of snuff taking was in the 18th century, and the French brought the accessories that it all entailed to a fine art in snuff boxes. One of the great scholars of the subject is Kenneth Snowman, who is also incidentally a great scholar of Fabergé, and he wrote this book, 18th Century Gold Boxes of Europe. I really recommend it. Now, these gold boxes were like the cigarette boxes of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. They were status symbols. Well-to-do people were very proud to be seen with beautiful gold snuff boxes. And this snuff box is outstanding because although it seems to be gold, it isn't. It is a perfect example of the best quality French Ormolu from the late 18th century. Ormolu means, in French, if you translate it literally, ground gold. And the Ormolu consists of a bronze base on which is fused an amalgam of high carat gold mixed with mercury. And the artisans would put this on, subjected to great heat, and the mercury would evaporate, leaving the gold on the surface permanently. Now, by the way, this was a very, very dangerous practice, and most artisans didn't survive past the age of 40. It was later discovered, of course, that this was very, very deadly, and the practice was banned. But this snuff box is a rare survivor of late 18th century, pre-revolutionary Ormolu at its finest applied to a small object. You'll notice how it opens, and even the inside is finished. The surface is beautifully tooled with varying panels of different textures, including guilloche, which is a very popular motif. And this, loaned to me by a very good antique dealer, who was kind enough to allow me to share it with you as a specimen, is a perfect example of a small Ormolu object. Now, Ormolu was a very big industry in the 18th century and even in the early to mid-19th century in France. And of course, it was applied to many objects. It was applied to the best hardware on doorknobs, hinges, pulls on drawers, hardware that would go on chests of drawers and such. And it was used frequently in candlesticks. And in the better homes, it was not unusual, as in this pair, to have Ormolu candlesticks, similarly finished to the snuff box, though it dates slightly later, about 1810, already we're in the period of the Napoleonic regime. And the crispness and the detailing of the surface shows the high quality that was achieved by artisans at the time. And these, of course, are column-shaped, as you'd expect from a style that favored classical-inspired motifs. A smaller pair worth sharing with you that a client was kind enough to allow me to use are this very charming pair of the same period that show many of the favorite Napoleonic motifs as well. And you can see the gold here has been particularly well preserved. It's very, very shiny and beautifully, beautifully maintained. And that is not often the case because 200 years of rubbing, they wore off. Now, as I said, Ormolu continued to be made into the 19th century, and this is a good example of what many of you may remember we discussed in the first installment when I discussed an Ormolu candlestick made by Maisonnier in the late 19th century. This is a pair of cassoulets, which are in the style of Louis XVI, about 1780, but these were made about, I'd say about 1830, 1840, and these are lovely cassoulets. And as you see, you take the little finial pointed tops, you reverse them, invert them, and they become candle holders. So regardless of whether you're collecting fine 18th century Ormolu or Ormolu up to the mid-19th century, it's a very, very elegant art form. And because the gold was really meant to last, a lot of these have survived into the early 21st century in extremely good condition. I hope you've enjoyed sharing this subject of great interest to me, and if you collect Ormolu, I'm more than happy to look at some as an appraiser, because to me, fewer things represent the gorgeous, sumptuous elegance of 18th century France more than the product of the Ormolu artisans. Thank you very much.